Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I'm talking to Theo Stickley. Theo has a wealth of experience in mental health, in PhD supervision, in PhD examining, and this was a fascinating conversation. We started with this sense of the PhD as a creative process. So we were thinking about it as a creative journey, as a process of synthesis. But then what came through the discussion is this sense of the kind of relational quality and relationship with yourself and your own intuition, and relationship also with your supervisor and with your potential examiners too. So I do hope that you enjoy this episode. Good morning, Theo.
Good morning, Emma.
Thank you so much for saying yes to come and talk to us. We've known each other for a little while, haven't we? And met through arts in health projects. And you've had lots and lots of experience in higher education, in mental health, and in thinking about health and creativity. So I'm really pleased that you said yes to come and share some of those thoughts with us. I always begin by asking people about their journey into their own research work. And so can you share a bit of your story with us, please?
Yes, of course. The focus of my PhD was on arts and mental health. And how I came into that, I need to very quickly go back into the 1980s, the late 80s, when I moved up to Nottingham to train as a mental health nurse. And while I was waiting for my training to start, I volunteered at the Mapley Hospital, which in those days was still a huge neo-Gothic asylum building on the top of the hill. And I volunteered on the acute wards. And one of my first impressions of the wards up there in this old asylum building was how drab they were and how bored people were. So I took my guitar in and started singing with people, and I started doing poetry, going out for walks. I set up a drama group.
Fantastic.
So I just did what came naturally and intuitively to bring a bit of enjoyment, fun, creativity, expression into what was a very drab environment. So that's where it all started. Then I trained to be a nurse, and I worked for 8 years as a mental health nurse. And during that period, I brought creativity into my practice as much as possible and influenced other people to do the same. So when I got a job at the university to teach mental health nursing, I was encouraged to do a PhD, and also supported to do that with time and 75% of the fees, which was very, very
Amazing.
helpful. So I think it took me 4 years, but they gave me a day a week, and that probably had more than that, to be honest. So and I thought the obvious focus for my study would be on the arts and mental health, because that's what I've just been doing intuitively for the previous 10 years or so.
And so you then went on, I know, to develop that practice through lots of different projects, and also develop your kind of theoretical reflection on that. and have impacted lots of people with your work. So this is why I was excited, because you are uniquely placed in terms of talking about mental health and doing a PhD and creativity. And as we know, creativity is a kind of a wellspring. It kind of can invigorate and inspire. And I just wondered whether you have any thoughts for PhD students who may be struggling right now, feeling stuck, because I think that can be often something that comes to people, and how they might find creative ways through that.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots I'd like to say about how I conceptualize PhD as a creative process, but
Yes.
I won't ignore your question about being stuck. So if I deal with that first and then go on to, more about creativity in study. Feeling stuck is a very, very difficult place. And I think people just need to tap into their own intuition, into what do I need, and think less about stuck, but think of me as an expressive human being with potential. And what, especially during these times of being locked down and everything, because I think so many of us are feeling starved of the things that normally nourish us, both socially and culturally. So I think it's even more difficult, perhaps, at this time to identify what can unlock us. What is it that normally, or that what's helped in the past? And what has helped in the past is what will help us in the future, and what's hindered us in the past is invariably what will hinder us in the future. So it's about being able to recognize the normal patterns in our lives and how that impacts upon our study. So this is where creativity and cultural expression and artistic expression or whatever comes into its own, because it's through tapping into these intrinsic creative needs and urges that we have, enables us to succeed, enables us to bring about change in our lives, enables us to think in parallel ways, in different ways. And so I would say the key to unlocking stuckness can definitely be found into reflecting ourselves and identifying what is it creatively that has helped me in the past, and what can I do about that now. And some of it might be a bit too ambitious, our first thoughts, but it's about identifying step one. What can I do today? What can I do by the end of this week? What can I do by the end of this month? So identifying steps towards bringing about change, because we can't just wave a magic wand. But we are, our destiny is in our hands. It's up to us to find our way forward. And this is where creativity, and I'm not going to prescribe any specific creativity because we're all so different. But
and that I love what you're saying there about that kind of going in, and that intuition, and you talked about instincts and urges, and this sense of, because I think often we externally reference and we're looking for someone else to tell us what to do, especially in an educational context. I think it's kind of we're looking for external validation, which of course there's part of it which of course there is external validation being sought, but recognizing that you, as you say, a lot of it's in your hands, and that you have instinctual knowledge of what serves you well, and of your own processes and creative processes, and And I know you want to talk about that, and I would love you to talk a bit more about that in terms of the PhD being a creative process and something that someone is going to kind of organically navigate, I guess.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a bit more about that.
Please do.
Okay, so there's some of this that won't be relevant to people that are doing very reductionist scientific kind of research, but for me, I'm very much a qualitative researcher, largely in the topic of the arts and human relations, as well as mental health. So for me, study is a creative process, and when it stops being creative for me, I go to a very unhealthy place. It's not what I want to do. I believe that as human beings, we are enormously creative people. So if we're embarking on a huge project, then I think it's got to be we've got to bring our creativity and allowed to express our creativity through that project. So one way of doing this for me, and for the students that I've supervised, I would always say something like this, that I would rather look at a PhD as a book that you're writing, and you happen to do research for that book. Yes. Because the traditional way of approaching a PhD is that we conduct a study and then write it up. And I think that's the wrong way round. I think what we should be doing is thinking about the end result as a creative thing at the end.
Yes.
And so what we do is we plan our steps to get to that finished product. And it is all about a finished product. We have to produce a thesis that gets examined. But the emphasis in my mind shouldn't be on just conducting a study, planning for a study and implementing it and writing it up. It should be about me as a researcher on a journey. And along that journey, I conduct a lot of research. Some of that is from books, some of that is, or a lot of it is from journal articles, but it's also about talking to people and thinking laterally away from the tight focus of my study. So this is where we come into an area of creative learning. If I'm studying one thing, the last thing I should be doing is focusing and harnessing all my energy in looking deeply into that one subject. Because what we should be doing is asking all sorts of critical questions around that subject. And those critical questions may only be answered by dipping into other disciplines. And this is where, say I'm studying, let's say, mental health nurse implementations on acute wards. Well, that is a very, very interesting area that I'll find a lot of information in the academic world and in academic books on nursing as a process. But also at the same time, there are all sorts of other things going on. There's all sorts of socio-political things going on, psychology and about groups of people and about power. And so it's about studying those other areas and looking outside of the focus that answers may come in a creative way when we're not looking directly at our question, but asking questions around our question and exploring areas that are unseemingly, well, not obviously related. And I think for me, that's about unlocking a creativity, whether it's in myself or in students, being able to unlock creativity within themselves. It's just think outside of the square and to explore areas creatively in our thinking, but also in our practice, to help us get away from what may be blinding us. And that is looking, if you like, imagine looking straight at the sun. We have to look away from what we're really focusing on, and tap into our creativity in order to be inspired and to find answers and to move on. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes absolute sense in terms of doing that kind of process of synthesis in order to bring things together in new formations. And as you say, then that may be looking outside your discipline, maybe looking from a different perspective, so that actually, you're able to make intuitive links with things. You're able to, draw together your material in a new way. This whole thing about originality, which gets talked about a lot, actually, there's no such thing as originality, as we all know, but there is your perspective on the work, and there is the way in which you've assembled material and brought it together. And I think that broad perspective that you're talking about in terms of bringing a range of material together really allows that originality to happen, because you've got those resources to draw on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some areas, historically, it might have been referred to a liberal arts education, if you like. That's part of what is important to me is to learn from the arts, to learn from disciplines that aren't immediately related to what we're doing. And I think in terms of a research process, this makes reflexivity make sense, because as you were saying, it's about what you bring, and it's about your journey and your experience. So reflexivity in certainly in qualitative research is about owning those processes and that journey, that adventure, that intellectual adventure that the student is on, and being able to record that and reflect upon that. And that, for me, is the meaning of reflexivity. I mean, we could go into that more deeply, but just to give an idea, when I wrote my 100,000-word thesis, by the time I submitted it, my journal, which wasn't submitted, was about the same size.
Right.
Because I'd just done creative writing, if you like, for 4.5 years. And so I would develop my journal at the same time I would develop my studies and my theses.
Yeah.
And incidentally, that work, although nobody else reads it, for me, I think is the most important output, because that's what enabled me to make sense of my studies, was writing about it in a journal.
Yes, and that sense of, which links to what you're saying before, of seeing yourself as a writer, that you're a writer rather than a kind of researcher first. Of course you're a researcher, but that sense of kind of your writing process as being really important. And I also just wanted to talk, just to mention again, that sense of that interdisciplinary study, because you and I have both done quite a lot of that kind of work. And I think what I found so interesting about it is the sense of when you're working in an interdisciplinary way, what it does is it really throws into sharp focus your discipline, the contours of your discipline. And that's exactly what you're saying in terms of enabling the reflexivity, because you're looking outside, and then it throws into relief what your discipline does, the norms of your discipline, which you might not see if you were not stepping outside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the benefit of reflective writing is that you're able to synthesize that process and come out with something that is potentially, your significant contribution to knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's only by doing that synthesis and committing it to writing. And just to be clear, your supervisors don't have to read your reflective journal. That's just for you. But it's a discipline of helping you to process and to synthesize that learning. And what we mustn't ever forget about a PhD project is that it is about learning. It's not just about studying something and getting results. It's about the individual's learning. And I guess what I'm talking about with this, liberal arts education is another old-fashioned educational theory is about deep learning.
Yes.
And also this kind of emotional intelligence that one gains through connecting with the arts and reflecting on one's processes. It's a kind of learning that is transformational. It's about, I am changing as a person in a way that I'm growing as a person. I'm becoming someone new, not only through academic learning, but through an experience of deep learning and being stimulated and inspired by ideas that are also interdisciplinary.
Yeah, so we keep talking about that here in terms of the sense of the PhD as a personal development journey. That's what nobody really talks about, but actually that is what goes on, that you change and you develop through that process. And so this key idea for you in terms of writing a diary, a journal, a reflective journal, as that being kind of your accompanying you on the way through your PhD journey, I think is really useful as a document and as a reflective tool. So that's already one top tip, because I always ask people for a top tip for others to take away. Now, actually, in advance of this interview, you brilliantly sent 10 top tips for PhD students, which we will send out to people, so you can click through on those from the show notes. So I don't know whether you want to go through all 10 or whether you have particular favourites that you would like to share as top tips. We already have the diary, which I think is really, really brilliant, really useful for people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know for many students, they're not able to choose their supervisors, but if at all possible, for people certainly setting out on a PhD, I think choice of supervisor is hugely preferable. Yes. Put it like that.
Yes.
I've seen some sorry cases of just a complete mismatch between supervisor and student. So the relationship between student and supervisor is really, really important. And when that relationship isn't good, then there's often a very real problem.
Have you got any advice for people if they are just now thinking about looking for a supervisor, what to look out for?
Well, because there are two sorts of looking. There's one sort of, internet-based looking, and then there's another by reputation. Don't just judge an academic by their reference list that what they publish, because what is very, very important isn't just that there's a kind of a topic match or a methods match. there needs to be a kind of a relational match as well. So if at all
Yeah.
possible, to go and have a chat with a prospective supervisor, once you know that the topic's right, the methods are consistent with their approach, if at all possible, go and have a chat with that person, and just get a sense of the chemistry.
Yeah, and that is okay. I think people don't always feel that they can make an approach directly to an academic. You will probably have to go through a formal process too, and submit through a doctoral school or graduate school, whatever they call it in the university you're applying to. But that you can talk to individuals and make an approach to them, and like you say, get a feel for them and get a feel for the relationship that you might have with them. That's really useful advice.
And then once on your journey, again, it's on a very similar vein. Is just be very careful about who you select for your external examiner.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm speaking as an external examiner. I've examined a good number of PhDs, and obviously I've supervised a good number of students as well. And some of the most complex problems I've dealt with is, to do with the examining process. And there's very little comeback if there are issues with an external examiner.
So again, do you have advice in terms of what people should be looking out for in an external examiner?
Yeah. Again, I know it's tempting to go to approach someone who's like the top of their tree and a guru in this subject, or you've loved their work and you've cited them so many times in your own thesis, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person to examine your PhD. I think it's very similar to the criteria for your supervisor. Yes, are they an expert in their topic? But do you have to go to someone who's at the top of the tree? Maybe there are lots of people climbing that tree who are just a few stages ahead of you that might be better. Because the other thing you need to know is, preferably from others that have been examined by this person, is that they're a decent human being.
Yes.
Yes. Just because they're a leading academic doesn't mean that they're not an assassin. I know it sounds horrible, but academics often think they have something to prove, even if they're very successful. And I don't want to sow a lot of negative seeds here, but let's listen to what people say about this academic, about their reputation.
Yes.
Are they good human beings?
Yes, I think absolutely yes. And that is really worth exploring. And so taking time with the examiners and being part of that process is really important, because this is someone that you're inviting to come into relationship with your work, and also potentially going forward, that they may be someone who can recommend your work going forward, can invite you to do things, and you want to have a really positive relationship with your examiners. I feel like we've got real value for money from you, Theo, in terms of 3 top tips of the diary, of the relationship with the supervisor, and relationship with the external examiner. Thank you so much for that, for reminding us.
I've just got one more I want to share.
Oh, yes. Right, blimey. A bonus. A bonus. Let's do it. Right.
When it comes to your examination, and you're going into that viva, an absolute bag of nerves. One thing that I wish I'd been told before I was examined for my PhD is that the truth is the internal and the external examiner have already read your thesis, they've already exchanged their views, had long discussions with one another. And it's virtually always the case that, nearly always the case, that they've kind of decided what the outcome of that viva is going to be before you go in. So the point about this is that you can relax, because unless you completely clam up, it's not going to change really what they've already decided. They've made a view on your, collectively they've got a view, and normally internally external examiners agree on the proposed outcome. So unless you really put your foot in it, there's not a lot you can do or say that will change the outcome of the viva. So just relax during the viva, stick to what you know, and what you've done, and what you've written and what you've learned, and you'll be fine.
Yes, I mean, you're the expert in that moment. I always just encourage people to remember it's their opportunity to show off. Like these are people who are really listening to what you're saying about your research, and that you are deeply immersed in that. And this is an opportunity for you to demonstrate that knowledge. So yeah, I think relax is the aim. If people can get to a relaxed state, blimey, I honour them. I remember my legs buckling beneath me, my viva. But absolutely, I think that sense of that they're there with, they've already read it, and they are there to listen, and attend to your work and attend to you. Well, we definitely got value for money then, because we've got 4 points from you, and I'd say you've given 10, and we will make those available so that people can have a look at those. Thank you so much, Theo, for just, I think what's come across from me in terms of what you're saying today is the kind of humanity of this process, the people in this, that you as a person in your process, you as a person in your relationship with your supervisor and your examiners. So thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you for being so generous spirited with your advice for others. And thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you so much, Theo.
Okay, well, thanks for the interview.
Thank you.